Life is something that you learn to love. This is something that you mature into. As you grow emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, you learn how to actually love life. When we're born, we have a very limited capacity to just enjoy life, to be open to it. When it's too hot, we cry. When it's too cold, we cry. When we're hungry, we cry. If we're too full, we cry. Every little inconvenience is something that deeply disturbs us. But as we grow older, we learn how to embrace more and more of life. Not only the painful aspects, but also the pleasurable aspects, the whole the entirety of experiences. We learn how to surrender to them, how to be open to them, and how to not fight against them, how to not avoid them, run from them, and how to not freeze, but how to stay open and totally conscious so that we're not suffering. You see, what we're kind of all doing here on planet Earth is we're chasing things that we want, avoiding things that we don't want. So when we do not get what we want and we get something that we do not want, this is typically an experience of suffering. But in those kinds of moments, you can learn, how do I let go of this obsessive wanting and avoiding kind of mechanism in our mind and surrender to life? There's nothing wrong with wanting, but when it's kind of obsessive and you're just stuck in that programming, you're going to experience a lot of suffering. Essentially, wanting is your mind sensing a disturbance in your being, and it's automatically trying to correct that disturbance. It's trying to bring balance to the system. It does this automatically. It's a mechanism. It's usually not a conscious mechanism. It just kind of plays itself. It's a system. And you have to kind of realize that getting what you want is never going to satisfy you. It's never going to bring an end to those disturbances. What will bring an end to them is learning how to surrender and open to life, how to learn to love life, how to mature into that. And the more and more that you kind of just endlessly chase what you want, the more and more you'll suffer. Now let's kind of talk about this. So we're essentially learning to love life, including what is difficult to love. It's easy to love sex and money and tasty food, but when you stub your toe, for example, right, a frustrating experience, an experience that bothers you, you're learning, how do I not let my sort of reaction and my nervous system, when it's kind of out of whack, how do I not let this overcome me, but return to a state of presence and openness and ease, right? You're kind of rewiring the behavior that leads to suffering. You're essentially teaching your mind how to exist and not suffer. I really don't want that to fly over your head, because that's a really complex thing. I don't even want to use the word complex. I don't even want to use the word deep, but it's essentially how to live life and not suffer. You're training your mind to do that. This is just really important, okay? I'll just leave it at that. This is something that, oh my God, you have to absolutely learn, of course, or else you're just going to keep suffering for your entire life. And essentially, how do you kind of do this? How do you teach your mind to kind of exist and not suffer so much? Where do you suffer in your life? What experience continuously generates suffering? You have to recognize that that suffering is something that you're creating. And I don't mean that in a sort of rude way. I mean this in a very compassionate way, but simultaneously a very direct and honest way, where we're actually looking at our experience. Our suffering, the overwhelming majority of it, is self-inflicted. It's unconsciousness within us that is conflicting with the present experience. We're fighting against the present, we're running away from it, avoiding it, or we're freezing. This is always leading to suffering. Our nervous system is out of whack, our perception of life is diluted, and therefore we suffer quite a lot, right? This unnecessary psychological suffering. So we're learning to love what is difficult. Some things are easy to love, and other things require practice. Right? When someone's frustrated at you, typically what happens is we start to mirror each other. Someone gets frustrated at you, this one is you, right? They get frustrated and you kind of start to mirror them automatically. But instead of kind of playing into that game and letting your nervous system go to whack, you learn, how do I just kind of stay at ease in this experience? Again, requires practice, for example. But when you're stuck in traffic and you hate this experience, you learn, how do I stay at ease in this experience? Regardless of the experience, a breakup. This doesn't mean that you don't experience grief or loss or painful emotion, right? Because those are completely natural. This means that you are no longer at war with what you experience within yourself, right? Your heart can play low notes, it can play high notes. A piano can play low notes, it can play high notes. Your heart can play grief and loss and sadness and shame, and it can play pleasure and bliss and joy, etc. And you learn, how do I just stay open regardless of this? How do I learn to just not fight against my experience, stop avoiding it, meet it directly? And this actually begins to decrease a lot of suffering. This requires quite a lot of honesty, quite a lot of awareness, and an alertness, really, kind of a sharpness. And I really want to emphasize the word honesty here, right? A sincerity where you're looking at experience and you want to see it clearly and you're willing to actually see what it is and what's going on. So you're generating a lot of your suffering. This is the brutal truth, but it's also the liberating truth. Because if you're generating it, you can stop. You're free to stop. Right now, I'm sure if you want to make yourself sad, you can do that. If you want to make yourself happy, you can do that. These are things that you're doing. And typically the processes of our mind, the mechanisms, the psychological system that we have when we're suffering, it's deeply unconscious. So when you're in moments of suffering, you learn, right? How am I creating this? This doesn't mean, again, right, just to really clarify, this does not mean that you remove emotion like shame or grief or sadness. But suffering here, I'm using this very, very specifically. It's when you're fighting against life. You're fighting against the feeling of grief, of loss, of sadness. These are just normal human emotions that, again, you learn to love by expanding your ability to embrace life. Right? Love doesn't really necessarily need to mean hugs and kisses. That's not really what I'm talking about, but you learn, how do I embrace life as it is in each experience without needing to alter it, push or pull against it, but I have to learn to ride life. I have to learn to move with life. Right, so let's kind of chat about this a little bit more. A big part of this involves opening your internal blocks. What are your internal blocks? They're areas where you shut down, you close, and they're stored in the body. The body and mind are one. They're stored in your being, and you learn how to open it up. So this is very counterintuitive stuff, because as you kind of programmed yourself to shut down in a particular experience, we're going against that programming. It's kind of counterintuitive. It feels counterintuitive. Whereas when someone gets mad at you, it feels natural to maybe lash back out at them. The counterintuitive move would to really just be there, be present. If you have to set a boundary, sure. If you have to, leave because maybe they're getting like violent or something, sure. But the counterintuitive move is to not let your nervous system kind of just like dysregulate and start mirroring them. So now you're lashing back at them. Right? That's just kind of one example. There's all sorts of ways in which we're going to have to go against our conditioning in order to evolve, because we've been programmed, we've repeated the same behaviors over and over again. We're kind of going down this same pattern over and over and over again. And now we have to open up some new avenues. We got to do different things so that we can remain open to life. This involves allowing our body to untense, feeling an emotion fully, not resisting a feeling. This means letting go of beliefs and ideas that continuously shut us down and close us down and create forms of disconnection. This means just abandoning those ones altogether. Those beliefs are BS. Those thoughts, they're useless. They're not doing you any good. So the counterintuitive nature of opening your blocks requires awareness, deep feeling into the energy of the pattern, and doing something else. This means consciously choosing something else rather than the same old pattern that you've been doing over and over and over and over again. And I'm not saying this is going to be easy. I'm also not going to say this is going to be necessarily hard either. Some things will be easy, some things will be hard. If you've been addicted to something for a very, very long time, that'll probably bring difficulty. There's going to be a lot of painful emotion there, and the impulse to do it, the pull is going to be strong. But ultimately, it comes from having enough awareness, enough mindfulness of the pull, enough mindfulness of the pattern that you're in, right? Enough presence and connection to that aspect of yourself, and then consciously choosing to do something else rather than following down that same pattern over and over and over again. And we find our sense of identity, our sense of ego, our sense of self in these patterns, which is a part of why this is so difficult. It's not even that we're just addicted to doing something, we're addicted to who we're being. This is who we are, who we think we are for the most part, who we interpret ourselves to be. And this this self, this structure, isn't really going to just kind of go just like that. It's really wired for survival to kind of hold itself in place. Right, so the counterintuitive nature of opening your blocks requires a very, very deep presence with that aspect of yourself that you've most likely been neglecting, you're abandoning, you're dismissing. Right, coming into contact with yourself. A miserable life, what does that actually really just involve? It involves closing down to aspects of life that, one, you don't understand, and two, you judge and believe are bad and shouldn't exist. All right, so let's get something clear. It took 13.8 billion years to get to this moment. There's been millions of forces that you have no idea about, complete ignorance of, that have helped to shape up reality to get to this experience. And again, keep in mind, 13.8 billion years, and here's you, 30 years into this life thing, 40 years, 20 years, 50, even 100. That's nothing compared to 13.8 billion and the complexity and intelligence of reality itself. Right here you are, that's bad, that shouldn't exist, that sucks. Of course, you have no understanding of how it even got here in the first place, or why. Right? You don't see the bigger picture. Your ego just sees, what do I like, what do I dislike, what do I want, what do I not want. It's filtering life through this. Right? So essentially, just kind of letting that go would be very important. So there's millions of unseen forces that you don't understand, and really, do you believe your mind? Do you really believe your mind when it says that something shouldn't exist and fights against them? Do you actually think it's correct? Can you see that that's a losing battle? That you're going to play that game for the rest of your life and it's going to be very, very uncomfortable? And can you see how extraordinary this all is? Can you just look at a basic thing, a glass of water, your phone right now, if you're watching us on your phone, your computer to monitor, your laptop, something basic, a pencil, and just be in awe of this basic experience? Looking at maybe these cows in the background and just being in awe of something very, 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 very simple, a shirt. You just look at life itself, existence, and you're in awe. Right? Do you kind of have that? Can you actually see that you don't really know what any of this is? This is all very, very mysterious. And can you just remain with that mystery, remain in the unknown, not need to fix it or solve it or get back to the known, but just not know. Just sit here and not know. Embrace not knowing. Embrace just not needing to figure every little thing out mentally, and just learning to open to life and embracing its mysteriousness. And here's a more advanced thing, right? Can you actually detect the intelligence of reality itself, right? This is a stream of consciousness. This isn't just a sort of like physical world. This is like God's mind, so to speak. We're in a stream of consciousness. The universe is intelligent. The universe is conscious, right? Can you actually begin to detect that? And this is something that you naturally realize as you open up, as you learn to not shut down to experience. Because shutting down essentially involves kind of pushing out awareness in an area of yourself. There's an area that is unconscious. By making it conscious, you open up, and then you naturally realize that, hey, reality is fundamentally just consciousness, appearing in all these kinds of different forms. And here we are kind of playing our role in that. So that's it for this video. If you're interested in working with me one-to-one, you can apply to do so. Link is in the pinned comment. Have a great day.